With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Mem Aleph. We left off on Daf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amud. We're going to first continue to add more details to the machlokes that we learned yesterday between the Amoyre Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yechanan. Whether Bein Derach Mekach Dein Berach Chilul, or whether Ein Hashvi'is Mischalelas Ela Derach Mekach. So when you are going to be redeeming or transferring the Kedusha of Peder Shvi'is on other food items, on money, etc. So Rabbi Yechanan holds that it's done, whether it's done through a sale or whether you made a normal chilul exchange, you being the same owner of both products. The Amoyre Rabbi Elazar holds that it only gets transferred over if a sale was made, and what we will ultimately learn is their machlokes is limited only to what we will call Pri Sheni. Pri Sheni means secondary produce. Pri Sheni means that when it comes to the Pri Rishon, when it comes to the original produce, to that which grew, as we will see, they both agree. We'll see what they both agree to. Where do they argue? Only when it comes to the secondary product and then to the third product, as we learned in the Braisa yesterday, that no matter how many times you make the chilul, then always the achrein, the last one will be imbued with Peder Shmita, with Kedusha Shmita, and there we have the machlokes. The Mishnah Daf Mem Aleph will discuss exactly which days of Sukkot is one obligated to take the lulav. We're going to learn in the Mishnah the concept of Zecher LeMigdash. We will also learn one other takana that was made Zecher LeMigdash, and that is called Yom Henef Kuloi Asur. Yom Henef Kulei Asur means the day of the waving. We are referring to the Omer prior to the Kemitza being removed from it. On the 16th day of Nisan, we would wave it. And Bezman Habayis, the moment the Omer was offered, then Chodesh became mutter. Question is, what happens when there's no Beis HaMikdash? So as we will see, really there's a machlokes whether Midoi Raisa, the 16th morning already allows one to eat Chodesh, and then Rabbi Yechanan ben Zakkai made a takana that one should not be allowed to eat Chodesh until the end of the day, or whether even Midoi Raisa, from the morning of the 16th, whether Midoi Raisa, you can only eat Chodesh after the daytime of the 16th, as we'll speak out when we learn the Sugya. We're going to have at the end of Daf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph Shitas Rashi and Shitas Tosfos that the third Beis HaMikdash is not going to be humanly built. It's going to literally descend from the heavens, whatever that means, and how this affects various halachas regarding the building of the third Beis HaMikdash. We're going to have on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis another Mishnah that's going to be predicated or based on the following rule. We are all familiar with the Gzeira D'Rabba, that whenever Shabbos falls out, when Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, we do not take the lulav, and that's true even if the first day of Sukkot, where the mitzvah of taking lulav outside the Beis HaMikdash is Midoi Raisa, if it falls out on Shabbos because of Gzeira D'Rabba, we don't do the mitzvah of lulav. However, it will become clear that this Gzeira was not standing during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, that when the first day of Sukkot fell on Shabbos, only the first day fell out on Shabbos, Bizman Habayis, the lulav was taken everywhere, not only in the Beis HaMikdash, but also by Medina, and thus we will have a whole Mishnah based on that fact. We're going to learn the sheet of the Tana Rabbi Yossi, that if a person inadvertently violates a Koris carrying sin, and normally the din would be that person will be chayv to bring a karban chatas if the violation came about while a person is attempting to do a mitzvah, then that person will be exempt from bringing the karban chatas. Finally, on Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis, we're going to learn the rule that the mitzvah of lulav cannot be fulfilled on the first day with someone else's lulav, even if you're taking it with their permission. Lulav she'ula is not going to be valid, and the solution for that, if you don't own a lulav, will be, as we'll learn today, the concept of matana al menas lahachzir. Even though you're giving a gift and it's on condition that it will be returned, it's halachically, legally considered a proper gift. and the person will fulfill the obligation of lulav as long as they meet the stipulation, as long as they return the lulav, and much, much more. So let us start on Daf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph, Amar Ravashi, 3 lines from the top of the Amid. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol ne'udvari. So what we had yesterday again was the machlokes Amar Rabbi Elazar ein shvi'is mischalelas ela derech mekach, that if you want to deconsecrate Peiroi Shvi'is, as we explained, that the original product, the pre-Rishon, never becomes deconsecrated, but it effectively imbues the other money item with all of the limitations of Shemitah product. But when does that happen? Rabbi Elazar says only if a sale was made. Rabbi Yochanan says it makes no difference whether it's derech mekach, whether it's derech chilul. Each Amoira had a Tana to lean on. So says now Ravashi that their machlokes is only b'pri rishon, only with the original product, with that which grew from the ground. Aval b'pri sheni. But let's call this when it comes to the secondary product. In other words, if one exchange or one sale was already made on food, on money, divrei hakoil, and then you're taking the prei sheni, like we learned in the Braisa. Right, you exchanged or you sold. The Braisa spoke about selling the peiros for meat, and then someone exchanged the meat for fish. Now, does it have to be with two parties bartering, which is derech mekach? Can it be you own it, you own both? Divrei hakol bein derech mekach bein derech chilul. It need not be done only through a sale. In other words, even Rabbi Elazar will subscribe to the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan if it is b'pri sheni. Says the Gemara, how can you say that? Didn't we learn yesterday when we brought the Braisa that was actually the base for the Shita of Rebbe, of the Amoira Rebbe Elazar, that it can only be done derech mekach? That Braisa spoke about a many changeover. They got meat, remember, and they went from the meat, and they went to the fish, and they went to the fish, and they went to the wine, and wine went to oil, and all of that. The Braisa said the words lokach. That was the whole diuk. And if you, Ravashi, are telling me that even Rabbi Elazar will be moided to Rabbi Yochanan, that his insistence of derech mekach is only b'pri rishon, that entire Braisa only gave the first case was b'pri rishon. All of the other subsequent cases was pri sheni, pri shishi, pri revi, and yet the Braisa only used the word lokach. That was the sole raya. So doesn't this refute Ravashi? Says the Gemara, no, because I did the Tani Reisha Lokach. That's why Tani Nami say for Lokach. As we'll see in a moment, Ravashi will be refuted, but not yet. The Braisa only wanted to be symmetric. Now, really, if you're going to make this argument, then you can also counter-argue that the whole Braisa is not a Raya to Rabbi Elazar. Right? The whole Braisa was that since the Braisa only mentioned Lokach, is a Raya derech mekachin derech chiluloi. Well, say the Braisa was just being symmetric, and in a moment, anyways, we will amend, we will clarify that which Ravashi is saying. And here we go. Eisvei Ravina Ravashi. How can you say that their machlokes is only by pri rishon when it says in another Braisa, Mishi yesh lo sela shal shvi'is? A person has a sela. Now a sela is again pri sheni. That means a person has a sela. Sela is 4 dinars. That. Let's go with Rabbi Elazar. Someone had Peiroi Shvis and he sold it, and right now, the owner of the fruit, instead of the fruit, he has that sela. Now, guys, remember the original fruit, always remains imbued and limited to the limitations of Peiroi Shvis. Fine, that's not the point. The point is you have money. And one of the dinim we keep on learning regarding Peiroi Shemitah is that even when you sell it, you can only sell it la'achla. In other words, you can't sell it to make profit and to put the money in the bank account. You're selling it in order for you to take that money and buy food with it, and that food will be limited, the achrein, that it has to be consumed before the Zman Habir. In other words, you can't use the money of Shemitah and buy something that will last. However, this person, this guy wants to buy a shirt. And like Rashi here reminds us that midoiraisa, you may not buy a shirt if the money still has in it the kedusha of Peiros Shemitah, because la'achla b'toich hazman, and you can't store it. It's miskayim l'shana, the shirts. So Keitzad Yasa, what should you do? So here the Braisa gives a gavaldik solution. Yelech etzel chenveni harogel etzloi. Go to a familiar storekeeper. We're speaking about a familiar storekeeper because he's going to want to accommodate you and he's going to do something that will be, so to say, not that convenient for the storekeeper, but you do whatever you could. Based the customer is king. And how can the storekeeper accommodate you? For oimar loi. And this holder of the sela should tell the storekeeper, Tainli besela peiros. I want to exchange, you give me peiros in the value of a sela, and v'noisenloi. Now guys, halkop, what happens right now? Remember, forget about the original produce, we're not even looking at that. The sela is not the pri rishon. If it's going to be exchanged, that's called derech mekach. Because it's two people, two parties. There's an exchange of a sela for peiros. Now the sela became deconsecrated, and now the peiros is holy produce. Now, 1 second, don't forget that this guy wants to buy a shirt with the seller. So what happens? Now, this person who has peiros that has kedusha shmita gives it as a gift, does not exchange it again, goes to the storekeeper. Now guys, the storekeeper is selling produce. This produce can be bought by anyone, and 99% of customers are going to take it and eat it. So it won't even really restrict the ability of the chenveni to sell the peiros, but he doesn't own it now. So now the person gifts it, a matana, he gives it back to the chenveni. It still remains imbued with kedusha shmita. And v'hu, meaning the chenveni, tells this person, tells his customer, hey, l'cha sel azu b'matana. Everyone has what they started out with. The beauty is this person who had a seller that had kedusha shmita, it's deconsecrated. Now we can buy a shirt with it. The chenveni who's selling fruits has fruits. Some of these fruits has kedusha shmita. He has to be careful when he sells it to people. He has to tell them, guys, make sure you take it and you eat it right away. Right? Don't preserve it for next winter. The haloi
for him to sell it, even though it's
won't be a
shmita.
Well, like this. He has to notify customers, Danny, and that's why the Braisa says chenveni harogel etzloi. In other words, if you're not a customer by that chenveni, there's no upside for the chenveni. But if the chenveni is a good businessman, I don't think he'll lose anything. And if he'll lose a little bit, it's worthwhile to do a favor for his customer. Because if I'm going into a store right now in a market and I want to buy oranges for Shabbos, I won't care if it has kedusha shmita. In other words, before the Zman HaBiur, I can take it and eat it, if that's what I'm planning to do anyways. And v'haloi loikeach behem mashe yirtza. And the guy that's holding the seller now has a bona fide, deconsecrated seller that has no kedusha shmita. Now the Gemara has a gavaldik question on Avashi. Let me ask you something. Why, if I have a seller, by default a seller's prisheni, a seller doesn't grow out of the ground. If everyone is moida that I can even remove the kedusha, derech chilul, and since it didn't grow, a taka gets removed, why do I have to go to a storekeeper? Why don't I go to my refrigerator, the same guy? And let me just make a declaration that the kedusha that's imbued in the seller should go over to the fruit. You don't need to go to a chenveni. Over here, the seller is the preishenihu, and yet vikatani derech mekachin derech chiluloi. Again, if you can use the option of chilul, why do you have to go to a chenveni? And this taka now Ravashi stands corrected. Ella Omar Ravashi, the opposite. That the machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yochanan is only beprisheni. And yes, this Braisa will also back up the shita of Rabbi Elazar. This Braisa will not go kishitas Rabbi Yochanan. Kishitas Rabbi Yochanan, you still have the same kasha. Well, this Braisa holds that you have to make a chilul only derech mekach. However, bepri rishon, everyone holds, even Rabbi Yochanan, so to say, and the Tana that he bases himself on, that only mekach in derech chilul loy. And here again, the Gemara says, hold on, didn't we have a Braisa yesterday that was used as the base for Rabbi Yochanan? And in that Braisa, we juxtaposed echad shvis ve'echad meiser sheni, that it could be deconsecrated, and the deconsecration of the Braisa that we learned at the end of the Amid. Right, the machlekes was only whether you can do it al chayin or only on shchutin. There it's even that a chilul, the Braisa used the words mischalalin. So clearly, even Pri Rishon could have its kedusha invested in something else through chilul. So the Gemara says no. That the Braisa that we learned yesterday is dafka speaking about demei shvi'is. It's not speaking about Pri Rishon. And I'll prove it to you because the I loy teima hachem. So if shvi'is means that which grew, to be the same. So Meiser, the Meiser Sheni, will mean Meiser Mamish, that can be. Because Meiser Sheni, the produce itself, cannot be deconsecrated even on Geshachtana animals. That's a klal. Not only Meiser Sheni cannot be deconsecrated on Shava Kesef. It has to be deconsecrated on money that has a image of a king on it. Right, Surah, v'tzarta ba'kesev, t'ksiv v'tzarta ha'kesev v'yodecha, gavaldik. So since the Braisa that's speaking, the machlokes is chayin or shchutin, but we're not insisting for the chilul of Meiser Sheni to happen on actual coins. Muzmin zagin that when it comes to Meiser Sheni, it's the May Meiser. We're not speaking about the original Meiser Sheni. That was already deconsecrated on money. And yes, you don't have to take that money to Yerushalayim. You can take that money and you can buy something else which will be taken to Yerushalayim. So just like Meiser Sheni must be speaking about the May Meiser, which we can call Pri Sheni, Hachinami, the Braisa is dafka speaking about the May Shvi'is, but indeed Ravashi stands that the Pri Rishon says even Rabbi Yochanan will be moida that when will the Kedusha also be invested in something other than that which grew, it's only if it was done derech mekach and not derech chilul. And now we conclude asiyum on our sugya of Shemitah, and now we're coming back to the Mishnah, to the laws of Sukah and Lulav. Says the Mishnah that Beroshoina, meaning during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, Lulav nitel b'mikdash shiva. Only in the Beis HaMikdash was there a biblical obligation to take the lulav during all of the 7 days of Sukkot. Like we spoke out already in the beginning, that when it says Olakachtam lechem b'yom harishon, b'yom harishon means only by Yom Harishon. But since this same pasuk says v'samachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yamim, so even though v'samachtem means the mitzvah of lulav lifnei Hashem 7 days in the Beis HaMikdash. B'Medina. Now guys, this is really a machlokes. We are going with the Rishonim that say B'Medina means any place outside the Beis HaMikdash. Even Yerushalayim is called the Medina. You're not in the Beis HaMikdash, biblically, and so it was during the times of the entirety of the Zman Bayis, even the Bayis Sheni, only Yom Echad. It's only from when the second Beis HaMikdash got destroyed. Mi shecharav Beis HaMikdash. Hiskin Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai sheyehei lulav nitel b'Medina shiva zeicher lemikdash. That zeicher lemikdash. Even outside, there's no Beis HaMikdash, lulav should be taken for all of the 7 days. Now, Chavah, one thing is very important, to have this in mind. Whenever we learn about Zeicher LaMikdash, there are two parts to it, and there are halachic consequences. There is a Zeicher LaMikdash is to remember how things used to be, and there's a Zeicher LaMikdash to be trained for the fact that the Beis HaMikdash is coming back. All right, it's both Zeicher LaMikdash, but remember that nuance. In other words, let me word it like this, if people will only take the lulav for 1 day, then when Mashiach will come in the Beis HaMikdash, it's going to be very foreign to take the lulav for 7 days. So get everyone in the habit already now of taking it for 7 days. That's another detail of Zeicher LaMikdash, and that's particularly true in the next line. So now that we mentioned a Zeicher LaMikdash, and guys, this is really mashma that's midrabanan, as we'll have this soon clarified in the Gemara, another din. What's the other din? So all of the grains, certainly the grains that grow in Eretz Yisrael. What about grains that grows b'chutz la'aretz? That's the big question, whether chadush is asr min ha'Torah or muter chutz la'aretz. But let's focus on Eretz Yisrael. One may not consume the new grains until the carbon oimer is brought. The carbon oimer was actually made out of barley, and we call the carbon ha'oimer a carbon that's waved because prior to removing the kemitza from the oimer, we would wave it. Now, when the Beis HaMikdash is standing and we actually offer the oimer, from that moment onwards, chadash, the new grains, may be consumed. When there is no Beis HaMikdash standing, Now here we go, let's begin the initial approach. Mida Oyraisa, from the morning of the 16th, Chodesh is going to be mutter. After the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, here again, came Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, also Zecher LeMikdash, as we'll see in a moment, and he said that Sheyehei Yom Henef Kula Yasur, that don't say that the moment it's Heir Mizrach, it's the Alois HaShachar, or a little bit of a later stage of the 16th in the morning, Chodesh could be consumed. No, you have to wait until the end of the daytime of the day of the 16th. Only then can Chodesh be consumed, Zecher LeMikdash, and the Gemara is going to explain what's the Zecher LeMikdash. How does that help us? Why did he make that takana? Okay, so before we go into the explanation of why is there a Zecher LeMikdash by making Yom Henef Kula Yasser, says the Gemara, Min Nalanda Avdin and Zecher LeMikdash. Where do we find this concept of Zecher LeMikdash? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar Kra Pasuk in Yirmiyah, that it says, Ki Allah Aruch Allah, that I will make a cure for you. This is all that which will come with Mashiach. And I will heal you from your makas, from your wounds. Ne'um Hashem, says God Almighty. And then the pasuk continues that during Galus, ki nidacha karulach, that the goyim, the nations, call the Jewish people the discarded ones. They made chayzik of us. We're the chosen people. Look what happened to us. Tziyoni, when indeed we are Tzion. So Tzion is really a reference to the Makim HaMikdash, or to the whole Yerushalayim, and Tzion is a name given to the Jewish people. So the Torah is saying, even though the nations called us the discarded ones, we are Tzion. However, during Galus, Doirish Eila, no one is seeking us. No one values us. And that's to the detriment of the nations of the world. From there we learn, Doirish Eila, they're being reprimanded, that no one is seeking the Jew, which is also called Tzion, and Tzion also refers to the temple, is Araya, Hazarai, Michlal de Boyedrisha, that we have to seek the Beis HaMikdash. Now, I just want to make it clear, this seeking of Tzion is not past-oriented. This is about a Yid, the Achakeloi, that a person, of course the Yidden, we have to constantly be seeking and wanting for Tzion to return. And that's going to be very much connected to the takanas we have in our Mishnah. It's not just to remember how things were, it's primarily to seek and to desire and already to be habituated in the way things will be with the building of the third Beis HaMikdash. Now, it's very easy to understand the Zecher LeMikdash for the first day in the Mishnah. So since in the Beis HaMikdash, Lulav was taken all 7 days, when Mashiach is coming in the Beis HaMikdash and every male is going to be there, right, the mitzvah of Aliyah L'regel, so let's get into the habit already now of taking the Lulav all 7 days, if not we're going to be out of touch. But the next din in the Mishnah, that Bizman Beis HaMikdash Kayam, Chodesh becomes permitted from when the Omer is brought. Then Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that now the entire 16th is not going to be okay. You have to wait until the end of the 16th for you to eat Chodesh. How is that Zecher LeMikdash? And this is clearly a future Zecher LeMikdash. My Tama, because Meheira Yibon the Beis HaMikdash, the temple is about to be built. And if now, the last year of Galus, the Yidden are going to eat Chodesh from the morning, from when, again, we're learning here that we are subscribing to the Shita that the daytime already is matter, the beginning of the daytime. So if every year people begin eating Chodesh from the 16th, but then when Mashiach is going to come, they're going to have to wait until the Karban Omer is brought. They're going to forget. They already got into the habit. We'll be in the habit of eating it from the morning. Last year, did we not eat on Chodesh already B'ha'ir Mizrach from the light of when the eastern horizon was lit up? So Hashtanami. And that's not correct, because once the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, when we do have the Ikar, we're focusing on the Mizbeach, the people perhaps will not realize that, yeah, the Ishtaket last year in Galus, do they have a Beis HaMikdash, then indeed, Heir Mizrachitir, then yeah, that's enough, just the daytime of the 16th. But now that there is a Beis HaMikdash, the Ikar Beis HaMikdash, then only the Omer is matir. So for people not to get into the wrong habit, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, you know what? You can't eat Chodesh the entirety of the day. Now that's a problem. And the problem is that when the Beis HaMikdash is standing, the Kohanim are so diligent, they don't kratz around. There was never a time that the Omer was brought after midday. So if it's all about preventing us from making a mistake and having, when Mashiach comes, having the Chodesh too early. He should have made a takana that you have to wait until Chatzois. Frag the Gemara 1 second. The Ivni Amos, when do you think the third temple is going to be built? If Mashiach will come, it's going to be built on the 16th. Well, if in the morning of the 16th there wasn't yet even the beginning of the building of the third Beis HaMikdash, then Heir Mizrach. Then there's nothing to worry about. Hadei hited Heir Mizrach. Elo, what might happen? Either the Ivnei Bechameisar, that it was built on the 15th. On the 15th doesn't only mean the 15th. The 15th means the 15th, the 14th, it was built a lot earlier. And taka then, the rule will be Machatzois Hayoim Ulahalon Tishrei. Then Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai should have always allowed us to eat Chodesh from midday, because as we learned in the Mishnah Menachos, that let me ask you something. You know, when Mashiach is coming, there's going to be a lot of technology built in, of course, when it's permitted in the Beis HaMikdash. People will be able to see, people will be able to know who, what, when, and where. Then, if you were not there, you didn't know. What happened Bisman Beis HaMikdash, the second temple, the first temple? How did a Yid that's living who knows where, that was allowed not to go to the Beis HaMikdash, or God forbid didn't go for whatever reason, how did he know when he can eat the Chodesh? So the Mishnah says, even though you don't know when they brought it, you can be sure that by midday it was brought. Mechatzois, mutare mechatzois yem olahalon, lefi she'ein beis din misatzlin boy. Now, so that the fear is going to be that maybe the Beis HaMikdash is going to be built on the night of the 16th, or it's going to be built samuch l'shkia sacham of the 15th. In other words, the Beis HaMikdash, the beginning of the building will happen before the morning of the 16th, but it's going to take around 24 hours, or it's going to take almost 24 hours for it to be properly set up and already functional. So that year, if it's going to happen that way, Machatzois, the Mizbech is not going to be ready yet. So forever, since maybe that's the way it's going to happen, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that Shiyah Yoim Henef Kuloi until the night. You can only eat Chodesh once you already exited the 16th day. Now here there's a big kasha that Rashi speaks out, that Tosfos speaks out, that what are we saying, that the Beis HaMikdash might be built at night, the third temple, or the Beis HaMikdash is going to be built on the 15th. Guys, the 15th is Yom Tov. What, on the 15th before Shkia, that's bonafide Yom Tov, and Tosfos here 4 lines from the bottom, Rashi 4 lines, 3 lines from the bottom, brings from Shavuos. He brings a rule, the Ein Bing in Beis HaMikdash Balayla, because it says Ubiyoim Hakim. Another rule, 2 lines from the bottom in Rashi. Another rule that we have also from the Masechta Shavuos, the Ein Binyan Beis HaMikdash Doiche Yom Tov. So how can that's not even a possibility? Says Rashi, look inside Chevra Rashi, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Ha Nemili Binyan Habonoi B'dei Adam. Whether it was the Mishkan, all of the Mishkanais, whether it is the 2 Bati Mikdashim that we had so far, Avol Mikdash Asid, but the future temple Sha'anu Mitzapim that we are constantly waiting for. Guys, this is a halacha, according to Rashi and according to Tosfos. Banoi u'mishuchlal hu. It's fully built, it's ready. And it's only that Yigale v'yovi min hashamayim, it's going to be revealed and come from the heavens, whatever that means. As it says, Migdash Hashem koinanu yodecha, that your hands established the temple. So there are no rules regarding when the third temple can manifest. And it can happen at night, and it can start happening during the end of Yom Tov. Amazing. And as we know, that the Rambam is the big shita that argues with Rashi. Tosfos says the same thing over here. He holds that Mashiach is going to build the third Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe speaks out that it's not necessarily a contradiction, that it could be that some of it will come down in Hashamayim, and there's going to be some human-made part. Actually, the human-made part will be like the body, and then that which will come from the heavens will be like the soul. And this is one of the big sources for this whole topic, Sukah Daf Mem Aleph. Beautiful. Okay. Everything we learned right now was all based that Midoiraisa, you can already eat Chodesh from the morning of the 16th. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Zecher, the future Mikdash, there shouldn't be a Michshoel. He added more of a Zman Isur. Says the Gemara that everything you said right now I disagree with. You didn't understand Pshat and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He did not say that. Rab Nachman by Yitzchak says, nicht gut verstanden, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai beshitas Rabbi Yehuda Omar, And guys, Rabbi Yehuda came many generations after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, so it doesn't matter. It means that they both have the same opinion. That which we know explicitly from Rabbi Yehuda is really also what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai holds. And therefore the pshat in the Mishnah is going to be different. And what is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? That min ha-toira, the Amar min ha-toira asur, that when there isn't yet a Mizbeach HaBeis HaMikdash, the Omer only becomes permitted biblically once the 16th day ended. Not like you're saying that when there's no Mizbeach, Midoiraisa, Misheheyer Mizrach. No, because since it says the Chsiv, Daf Mem Aleph Amid Beis, and this is a pasuk in Emer regarding the Omer. Ad Etzem Hayoim Hazeh. Now guys, just to know, Etzem Hayoim Hazeh, I know we learn Chumash Rashi, many times we learn that it means until midday, middle of the day. Etzem hayoim hazeh means until the entirety of the day. The entirety of the day begins in the morning, Misheheyer Mizrach, and the entirety of the day ends at Shkia. And now the question is, when the Torah says ad, that you may not eat chadash ad va'ad b'chlal, until and including, or ad v'lo yad b'chlal. So let's begin with that. Since Rabbi Yehuda holds ad va'ad b'chlal, so when he read the pasuk that you may not eat chadash ad etzem hayoim hazeh, again, etzem hayoim hazeh means until the entirety of the day, ad itzum shel yoim. Yeah, the itzum shel yoim begins in the morning, but it ends at night. And the kosavar, not only is that Rabbi Yehuda, but Rav Nachman by Yitzchak is saying that it's also Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, ad va'ad b'chlal. Oh, so when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said in our Mishnah, according to Rav Nachman, that v'sheyehei yoim henef kulei asur, it's not another takana that he made ki'ilu midrabanan, it's a doiraisa. Now, that's not everyone else's understanding. That's the big chiddush of Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. So the Gemara challenges that. How can you say that? You know, Mele in our Mishnah, you know, you don't have the words takana on the second part, on the part of henef. But in a Braisa, it's more elaborate. We know from a Braisa that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai argues with that which was said later by Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, or the Tanan, I have a Mishnah here, from when the temple was destroyed, Hiskin. Guys, the word Hiskin normally means something that Midai Raisa was one way, and then the Chachamim made up Sanu Takana. Hiskin, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Sheyehei Yoim Hen of Kol Yasser. Now, I know it's implied in our Mishnah because the Mishnah juxtaposes one with the other. And when the Mishnah spoke about the lulav mitel b'Medina, in our Mishnah, the Mishnah said the word hiskin, but later in our Mishnah, the word hiskin was not written on the second din of Yom Hanaf Kulei. But here in the Mishnah that we're quoting right now, it says clearly hiskin. And not only that, and Amalei Rabbi Yehuda argued, and he tells him why hiskin. Because it says ad etzem hayoim hazeh, and etzem hayoim hazeh doesn't mean midday. It means aditzuma shel yoim, until the entirety of the day. And what you have to add is since Rabbi Yehuda holds b'chlal that ad ve'ad b'chlal, so until the entirety of the day ends. So clearly they argue. Says Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, no. That Mishnah doesn't do anything to me. Because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai holds, according to Rav Nachman, that according to Rabbi Yochanan, Mida Oiraisa, you have to wait until the end of the 16th. Rabbi Yehuda misunderstood him. Rabbi Yehuda understood or misunderstood that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, using the word hiskin, meant that it's Absamid Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda hu de Kotoi. Who Sava Rabbi Yehuda misunderstood by thinking that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai holds that it's only midrabanan ka'amar. For that, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I disagree with you. Ad va'ad b'chlal, no. If there's no mizbeach, you got to wait until the end of the 16th. But says Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, but v'loyi, Rabbi Yehuda misunderstood Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai because really midoiraisa ka'amar. So actually, they subscribe to the same shita. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used the words hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. That's not a problem, according to Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, because my hiskin, darash vehiskin. Darash is when you darshan a pasuk. It's people, they forgot, the second temple stood for 420 years. People knew, when is the Chadash Mutter? From when you bring the Karban Omer. And like we just learned on Amadal of the Mishnah Menachas, and if you're not around in the neighborhood, by midday it was brought. People forgot what happens when there's no Mizbeach. So he expounded ad etzem hayom hazeh, and he told you what the din Torah is. That's what he meant. Rabbi Yehuda misunderstood him, so therefore he made his comment.
Rabbi, should you just clarify one thing? So where we're at right now, according to Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, once the Omer was brought, the Daraisa, you're good.
That's according to everyone. According to everyone, that's that way.
But if there's no Omer brought, and we're saying the Daraisa out the entire 16, you have to wait.
That's correct. That is for sure Rabbi Yehuda. The question is whether Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai agrees to that, or whether Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai, which is the other Amoraim on Amud Aleph, hold that Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai holds that ad v'lo yad b'chlal, and midoraisa, when there is no Mizbeach yet, from the morning you can eat chadash, but he made a takana. Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai was the main Tana that made takanas connected to the Churban Beis Hamikdash in preparation of the third temple. Okay. Next Mishnah. Guys, every din today is mamish fundamental. Says the Mishnah. Okay? Now we know that when Yom Tov, when Sukkah falls on Shabbos, that's any day of Sukkot. Even the first day of Sukkot, that the taking of the lulav is biblical. If it falls on Shabbos, and really more than that. But everyone quotes that, which is correct. So because of Gzeira, what we call Gzeira Darabah, nowadays the lulav is not taken on Shabbos. You should know, Chevra, that when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, if the first day of Sukkot fell on Shabbos, there was no Gzeira then. No Gzeira then means not only was the lulav taken in the Beis Hamikdash, it was taken everywhere. And based on that, we have this Mishnah. This Mishnah was learned bisman shebayis sheni kayam. The challenge is, guys, don't forget that one may not carry a lulav, one may not carry hoitzah on Shabbos. So how did they resolve that? Now the simple answer will be, even though it's not intuitive because people are so makbid with their dalad minim, but let's speak about for us Lubavitchers, Baruch Hashem, proud to be Goam of Tzayim. We're familiar with Avos Yisrael sharing a mitzvah. So normally the solution would be, well, everyone should buy their own set, just bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, and then take any set. That is not a solution. Because as we know that dafka on the first day, a lulav that's not yours, even if you take it with the permission of its owner, is not going to be good for you. So says the Mishnah, Yom Tov Harishan Shel Chag. Chag meaning Sukkos. Shechali is b'Shabbos, yes, bisman shebayis kayom. They would fulfill the mitzvah everywhere, not only in the Beis Hamikdash, everywhere. So kol ha'am moilichin es lulaveim lebeis hakneses. Everyone will have to bring the lulav, guys, erev Sukkos, of course, erev Shabbos, erev Sukkos, because you can't carry. That's the whole issue. However, you got to make sure that you find your set. Lemachros. The word mashkimin is milsal gavurcha. Mashkimin is because zrizan magdim lemitzvos. Mashkimin when you wake up early, and v'cholechad v'yechad makir es shaloi. That's the key of the Mishnah. You make sure you find yours, and you take it. And why do you have to make sure? Why not just say everyone should bring a set, a potluck, and everyone should take anyone. Mipnei she'amru chachamim ein adam yoytzi yedei chayvasi b'yontav harishoin. However, b'shari yemais hachag, now it's important. B'shari yemais hachag, even bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, on Shabbos they didn't take it. But in the Beis Hamikdash, no matter when Shabbos fell out, they would take the lulav. So the latter part of the b'shari yemais hachag, Adam yoytzi yedei chavasi v'lo shel chaveri, it says in the Beis Hamikdash. So everyone would bring the lulav. Here again, you're not allowed to carry. You would bring it to the Beis Hamikdash prior to Shabbos, and there's going to be many more lulavim, because here many more yidden go there. And there, even if you don't find your own, everyone, as long as everyone, it's like you go to the mikveh, you don't have to walk away with your pants. You can, you walk out with a pair of pants, just as long as everyone has something to wear, is Shalom al Yisrael. Theoretically. Now, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Yom Tov Harishan Shel Chag Shchalias b'Shabbos, and here again, Bisman Shebeis Hamikdash Chayam, everyone took their lulav, but it could be that a person forgot. Let's say a person forgot at Shabbos. It's Yom Tov. You were so excited, and if a person exactly what the Rabbah wanted to prevent. But Bisman Shebeis Hamikdash Chayam, The first day there was no gzeira. A person inadvertently carried their lulav, whether it is to the shul, whether it is to ask a chacham how to properly take it, how to do the nanuyim, whether there's a psul in one of the dalad minim. And you would say, well, if that happened, that's a classical case of a person who bishoigeg was machalol Shabbos chayiv chatos. Says Rabbi Yossi that in our case, pater means he's exempt from the chatos, farvos, because there is a generic rule that Rabbi Yossi has, not related to sukkahs, related to any chatos violation. Since shehoitzioi bireshus, since hoitzia bireshus, Rashi says bireshus doesn't mean it was something permissible. Bireshus means bireshus mitzvah. Why did the person carry the lulav? Says Rashi, shehoya tarud b'mitzvah. Umachashev, he was thinking about the mitzvah, va'asuk, and he was occupied in it. Umamayir la'asoisa, and all of that is why he forgot it was Shabbos. Umitoichach ta'av v'shachach shehu Shabbos. Oh, so what? So let's read the end of Rashi. V'kosover the Tana Rabbi Yossi that ta'a b'dvar mitzvah and v'shogag b'dvar kares pater mikarben. Wow. Says the Gemara. Minohanamili refers to that part of the Reisha of the Mishnah, that on the first day and only the first day, even if you have permission to take your fellow's lulav, you will not fulfill your obligation. It must belong to you. So you can't carry on Shabbos. You got to bring it to shul out of Sukkot, out of Shabbos. On the other hand, tomorrow, says the Mishnah, make sure that you're makir. Why do you have to makir shaloi? The Tanach Rabbanon. When it says in Emor, vilokachtem, and not vilokachta, if the Torah would have written vilokachta, then one might have thought that this is a mitzvah that is incumbent upon the Beis Din as the representative of all the people, that only one Beis Din takes it on behalf of all. But since it says ulokachtem on the plural, every individual has to take it, like most mitzvahs. Then when it says the words lochem, says the Braisa, it means mishel lochem. It must belong to you. And what does that exclude? Lohoitzi es hashaul. And now we also mention Gozel. We already learned to Tosfos above that Gozel was not needed to learn from the lochem, because that would be a bona fide mitzvah baba aveda, but it's emes, so we write it anyways. But the key is that on the bayoim harishon it must be yours, not even borrowed. And mikan.
How does this compare to shofar?
How does it compare to shofar?
You're not allowed to take a shofar to shul because that's why we don't go shofar on Shabbos.
So I just said, Samach, that correct. That after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, even when it's the first day of Sukkos and the mitzvahs natilas lulav is midoraisa, Rabbo also made sure that this takana not to do it includes not to take it on the first day of Sukkot. And a chanami, but Bezman Shabbos Hamikdash Kayom and Samach, when the temple was standing, if Shabbos fell out on the second day, on the third day, all right, anyway, when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, there was no gezerah anywhere not to take the lulav. People took the lulav. Okay. Now, mikan amar chachamim that ein adam yoytzi yedei chavasa b'yom tov harishon shel chag b'lo shel chaverei. And now a technical thing says the Gemara, as we all are familiar with. Okay, what happens if you don't have a lulav? What should you do? Or I'll tell you better. What happens if you bought a lulav, you took it to your shul, and some person b'shoigig, b'mezid, b'oinus, some person took your lulav. I'm sure every shul had such a guy. He doesn't have it. What should he do now? So if you can't do it borrowed, vazal minton. Ella, that's what we're adding now. That Ella imkain is son of matana. That giving it as a gift, that's fine. If you received it as a matana, then it's yours. And now we have a maisa. It's amazing, right? These Tanoim, many stories about them. Umaisa berabban Gamliel, verabba Yeshua, verabba Loza ben Azari, verabba Akiva. Guys, I know it sounds like the Haggadah, but it's not, because by the Haggadah we have Rabbi Eliezer and we have Rabbi Tarfon. Here, these two are not, but we have Rabban Gamliel. Anyways, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Akiva. They were traveling on a ship, lulav, and they did not have a lulav. Who had a lulav? Only one. Ella Rabban Gamliel Bilvad. And just to know, he spent, if you think you spend a lot of money on your kala ve'esrik, go try to outdo Rabban Gamliel. He paid 1,000 zuz, 1,000 zuz. And what happened? So first, Natali Rabban Gamliel v'Yatzabai. He fulfilled the mitzvah. But you know what he did? Then he gave it to Rabbi Yeshua ben Matana. Natali Rabbi Yeshua v'Yatzabai. I lochem. So what? He got it as a gift. Then, after he fulfilled the obligation, he gave it to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah ben Matana. Then, Natali Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'Yatzabai unasani ben Matana l'Rabbi Akiva. You can just imagine the discussion that they had amongst each other, who should be second, who should be third. And Natali Rabbi Akiva v'Yatzabai, after Rabbi Akiva was Yoitza, v'hechziloi Rabbi Yechana, the Rabbi Gamliel. I'm sorry, he gave it back to Rabban Gamliel. Asks the Gemara, why is that detail important? In other words, why is it, what's the legal significance? Not to tell you stam what happened. No. Really what happened is that when Rabban Gamliel, after him fulfilling the obligation, when he gave it to Rabbi Yeshua, he gave it to him b'matan al manas lahachzer. And when you give something as a gift on the stipulation that it must be returned to me, only if it's ultimately returned are the prior gifts a gift. And if it's not returned, then retroactively it was never a gift. So that was needed. And milsa gav urcha kamashmalon, that matan al manas lahachzer is legally considered a gift. Lest you think that giving such a gift, if it has to be returned, then maybe halachically it's not called a gift. No, it's called a gift. In other words, even though the story is not recorded by writing in the Braisa, that Rabbi Gamliel said it's a matana al manas lahachzer, but the Tana is meramezed by saying that echziroloi. Now, we find this is a common practice. So you can say only a b'di'evid when they are on a boat. No, Rava wasn't on a boat. And he told his fellow Jew, hey loch esrig zeh, al menas shetachzirei. Give it back to me. It's just a lohoyer stam, that it's interesting that in the Tana, in the Braisa, they emphasize the lulav. Here we're emphasizing the esrig. I know that nowadays, if you use one for the dalad minim, you speak about the esrik. The expensive one now is the esrik. Maybe there was a switch between the times of the Tanoim to the times of the Amoraim. Anyways, so Amanash Tachsireoli and the Nitaloi and the recipient took it from Rava and V'Yatzabai and Ichziroi. If he gives it back, then Yatza. If Lo Ichziroi, but if he doesn't give it back, then Lo Yatza. Wow, Matan al Manas Lahachzir. And
Rabbi, what about the Mitzvah the first day? You're doing Mitzvah with someone, so you have to say, I'm giving it to you as a gift on the condition that you give it gifted back to me. You have to make that statement. And as we know, Tzvika, that the only challenge will be when it comes to a minor, because minors, mipnei tikun ha'olam, are able to acquire, but they are unable to bequeath is the wrong word. They're unable to relinquish their ownership for you and then to acquire it. You can't do that. So you make sure that you do the mitzvahim first with adults, and then you give it to a child for chinuch. Now another detail. Lama lila meimer shalak chibel of zuz. Says the Gemara, Lohoidiyacha kama mitzvahs chavivas aleihen. Aleihen means on them, on all the chachamim. You should know that when it comes to the money expenditure for positive mitzvahs, there is a limit. There is a limit. What he did was way beyond the limit. Why does a person spend more money than they're obligated to spend? Because they love the mitzvahs, meaning they love God. And we should know, kama mitzvahs chavivas aleihen. And indeed, Amar lei mar, that was his name, the son of Ameimar, to Rav Ashi, that my father, that's Mar sharing about Ameimar, he loved lulav so much. Here it's about he spent money. Another expression of love, that even when he davened Shemona Esrei, he held on to his dalad minim. Saluyei komatz lebei. Why did he hold it during davening? Guys, we have to hold it during Halal. Why did he hold it during Shemona Esrei? Because he loved the mitzvahs. Asks the Gemara, whoa, holding it during Shemona Esrei, who says that's even allowed? Meisvei, it says in a Braisa, that lo yoichas adam tefillin biyodoi.
you can't hold tefillin in your hand. You can wear tefillin. We're speaking about holding it in your hand. Or you may not hold a Sefer Torah b'cheikoi. That's just the nature. It's not in your palm. It's already in your bosom. That means you're holding it in your zroya. You're leaning it against your chest. And v'yispalel and you'll daven. You can't do that. Similarly, v'lo yashten behem mayim. While a person is holding tefillin in their hand, they should not urinate. Similarly, by holding a Sefer Torah. Also, v'lo yishan bahen. We had this above. Not only may you not sleep shinas keva, a fixed sleep, not even shinas are, not even a nap. And on that, the added Shmuel on this brisa that a knife, he's going back to Shemona Esrei. You cannot hold a knife when you're davening Shemona Esrei, nor a ka'ara, a plate with food, nor bread, nor money. Harei elu kayoytze bohen, that while you're davening Shemona Esrei, you may not hold it in your hand. So why? I get it. I may not love the mitzvahs. So spend 1,000 zuz if you have to. And no one should take advantage, but if we have to do it, we'll do whatever it takes. But how can you daven Shemona Esrei holding it? Answers the Gemara. Indeed, you are allowed. Why is it different than the cases mentioned in the Baraisa? Hassan over there, since lav mitzvah ninu, since there is no mitzvah to hold a tefillin in your hand when you're davening Shemona Esrei. Since there is no mitzvah, there's no upside. So therefore, v'tarid buhu, you will be preoccupied in your mind to make sure that you don't drop it, and it's going to distract the potential level of kavana that ideally we should have when we say Shemona Esrei. This is a very important Rashi. Even though the minimum is to take the lulav and we take it and then we not do nanuyim and you did the mitzvah. Let me ask you a question. It's like wearing tefillin. If a person put on tefillin and they took it off, they did the mitzvah. But if it stays properly on your arm and on your head for an hour, that's even more. You're doing a mitzvah. You're wearing tefillin. When you take the lulav in your hand, as long as you don't put it down, you are fulfilling a mitzvah. So since holding it for a prolonged amount of time, even though it's not necessary, is called a mitzvah, we no longer say that a person is going to be preoccupied by doing a mitzvah. No, it's not even called a preoccupation. It doesn't distract from your kavanah. It's amazing. No, you would think on a das balabatim here, it's hepach das toida, you would think, who cares? You have it in your hand, you're preoccupied not to drop it. Lamai nafkamina, it is a nafkamina. If you're holding it in your hands and you know that you're doing a mitzvah, it does not diminish your potential kavana that you should have by Shemona Esrei. And therefore, yes, you are allowed to hold it even during Shemona Esrei. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik Oimer, Kach hoyim en hagam shalan she'iru shalayim, that Adam yoytzem mebeisa v'lulavi biyadai. It's to prove that even though the minimum mitzvah of v'lokachtem is just take it. And now we do waving. Wow. No, you can hold it the whole day, and holding it the more than less is a mitzvah. When they would go on the street, the original Anshe Yerushalayim, they would do meftzoim. They went, they held a lulav. When they read the Shema Mispalel, lulav biyadai. They only put it down either when they read the Torah. Guys, when you read the Torah today, whoever's called to the Torah is the reader of the Torah. You have to open the Sefer Torah. You have to close the Sefer Torah. Sometimes you have to roll the Sefer Torah. No, you need your hands for the Sefer Torah. Then they would have to put it down. Or if a kohen was called up to V'noisas Kapav, he has to push it, lift up his hands. That's the only reason why they would put it down. Then Manichay al Gaba Karka. But let's go weiter. After they left the Beis HaKnesses and the Beis Hoylech Levakar Choylim, or if they went to be Menachem Avelim, always Lulavi Biyadai. And the final time where they put it down was that if Nichnas LaBeis HaMedrash, then Mishaged Lulave Biyad B'nai Biyad Avda Biyad Shluchai, they would send it home. And why is that? It's amazing. Shemona Esrei, holding the lulav won't distract your kavanah. But learning Be'inyun, as ideally one should, even though it's a mitzvah, holding a lulav, it's going to distract your ability to properly learn in the Beis HaMedrash. So then is when they sent it home. And the last line in the Amid, and my komash malon, des komash malon diacha, kama hoyu zirizin b'mitzvahs. So zirizin sometimes is understood as doing it as soon as possible. Here the concept of zirizin is understood that they held the lulav as long as they could. I know, adarabah, that's the zrizin, diligent, is that I'm going to hold on to it unless it's going to take away from another mitzvah. Gewaldig, Chevra, to be continued.